What kind of things do you look out for when you're re-entering the home?
Bugs and people.
It works like this. If a piece of property sits idle, sits vacant, no one pays any taxes on it for 4 years, it goes to the Jackson County Courthouse where it is auctioned on the steps of the courthouse. And at that point, if nobody buys that property, it goes into the land bank.
We have this land bank RFP. We're selling vacant and abandoned homes for $1 provided the new owners fully rehabilitate the property, eliminate all blight, and provide those homes to people who are homeless or at the lowest income levels. We're trying to make sure that we just have enough roofs and different types of facilities and homes for people across the board.
Huge hole right here.
Oh.
Huge hole.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that we do acquire is this or worse shape.
If you would ask me to rate a land bank home from 10 to 1, 10 being the best of the best in the land bank and 1 being the worst of the worst, I'd put 2404 Monroe as a 5.
Definitely affordable housing is a challenge in our community as well as it is across the country. And so, we really saw it potentially as an opportunity to acquire some properties, be able to rehab them and provide that affordability pathway out for people. We could, apply to the RFP, essentially take on the homes as part of a development, under us and be able to charge those individuals rent at the rate that was affordable, to that extremely low income household. And that's where it just doesn't make sense.
If you're a developer or a rehabber and you go into rehab a house that has been vacant for 10 plus years, you're dealing with a lot of deferred maintenance, and the cost to renovate that home could be a lot, up to $150,000. And then it just seemed like, okay, after the renovation is done, and you've worked with the supportive service provider to identify an individual or family to occupy the home, that individual family is not paying any rent. So it's pretty much you just dumped $150,000 into a home and you just gotta eat it.
It's not easy, it's not cheap, but the benefit, we have seen the benefit of rehab land bank homes because everybody knows the best way to stabilize a neighborhood is to have somebody in these homes.
You go to some of those neighborhoods and it's like almost entire blocks have been demolished, right? And so seeing that type of vacancy is, it's actually kind of overwhelming, right? To imagine that at one point there were houses or apartment structures or, even commercial businesses, right? That once stood where there's now like nothing. And so talk to some older folks who have been in the neighborhood for decades, and they'll tell you like, well, back in the day, I remember this used to be here, or I remember, there was this pool or this like institution and it's just gone. And so, maybe in an aspirational sort of way, it's like getting back to that old kind of feeling. And so for them, they look at housing, and whether it's vacant housing, land bank housing, houses that are owned by the homesteading authority, right? Like they look at all of these as opportunities to sort of build back to that vibrancy that they remember, when they were young.
I like looking at houses like this. I like it because I think about what it was like 20, 40, 60 years ago. There a young couple that just got married that moved in here 60 years ago. And 10 years after that, were there little kids running around in this yard. And 30 years after that, were there grandkids and a grandma sitting on the porch. And that's what I try to visualize when I look at these land bank homes and what they can become. We can transform the neighborhood and almost start from the beginning again if we get this right. And I think we're on the right track to getting it right.
KSHB 41 obtaining body-worn camera video in the shooting death of a former police detective. Lionel Womack was shot and killed by a fellow Kansas City, Kansas police officer in November. As Caitlin Canute explains, this newly released video seems to support the explanation given by police as to why they say they were forced to shoot one of their own. First, we should warn you, what you're about to see may be graphic and upsetting to some.
On November 21st, 2021, Lionel Womack was shot and killed by Kansas City police. They'd been called to the area on a report of a man walking in the middle of the road, acting strange. When the first officer arrives, you see in this video, Womack starts running toward him before then trying to get into the passenger side of his police car. Then Womack comes around the front of the car and appears to charge toward the officer, who raises his gun. As Womack gets in and out of the car, the officer again raises his weapon, and Womack appears to grab for the gun, engaging the officer in a struggle. Watching that scene again from the body camera of the second officer offers an even clearer look at what prompted the fatal shots to be fired. First, as officer number 2 gets out of the car and approaches Womack, he can be heard trying to calm him down.
Hey, relax.
But as Womack reverses course around the front of the car, the second officer comes around the back in time to capture the two men grappling over the gun. Womack falls to the ground and appears to point the gun at the first officer, who either fell or intentionally threw his body to the side to take cover. From there, Womack seems to swing the gun toward the second officer, who opens fire, shooting Womack.
Okay, buddy. Yeah, I'm good. I think I got hit in the toe. Oh, wait. 1038. Lost 1038. You just saved my life.
After Womack died, his family questioned the shooting, asking whether more could have been done to de-escalate the situation.
It's the hard part. It's not so much as he was a black man. He was one of them. They called him brother once upon a time. And now you're gonna kill your brother? Why?
Just last month, the Wyandotte County District Attorney's Office confirmed the two officers would not face charges. Although not commenting specifically on this case, a special agent with the ATF has previously explained to us that de-escalation is not a mandatory tactic. Instead, he says it's something officers try if safety and time are on their side.
Situations can go from very calm to very threatening and life or death situations in a split second. And that's one of the reasons that the Supreme Court, even in Graham versus Connor, they said that people have to make allowances for the fact that officers are making these decisions, these use of force decisions, in situations that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving.
For the I-Team, Caitlin Canute, KSHB 41 News.
Support for Civic Affairs programming on Kansas City PBS is made possible in part by AARP, Kansas City.
Hi, I'm D. Rashawn Gilmore. Welcome to Flatland. Every month we dig into one issue, raising questions, causing tensions, or quite frankly has gone curiously unexplored in our area. For this episode, we'll be talking about houselessness in Kansas City. Over the last year, homelessness has never been far from the headlines in Kansas City. After Scott Ecke froze to death in his tent last winter and advocates formed the first homeless union of Kansas City, city officials mounted an unprecedented response. Bartle Hall was opened as a warming center for hundreds of unsheltered people. Up to 500 hotel rooms were available for 90 days. Meanwhile, the city council grappled with longer-term solutions, such as creating a tiny home village. But as emergency programs come to an end, many found themselves back out on the streets and encampments where they faced the near constant threat of sweeps. With winter approaching again, let's take a look at how service providers, city officials, and those experiencing homelessness are coming together to form both short-term and long-term solutions.
Bartle Hall was a great idea in theory, and we met our goal and objective of the winter of having nobody die on the streets of our city because they didn't have a place to stay. Bartle Hall at some point ended, and the hotel program we did this spring at some point ended. Through those two things, we provided a lot of services and support to people who did not have it. Where are they after that? There are still people that we weren't able to serve.
I grew up in foster care. I moved constantly. I have emotional and psychological issues where I can't maintain a place to stay very well because I'm always terrified that someone is going to come and tell me it's not home anymore. I lived in my vehicle for a long time. I would just drive around the country, and somebody stole that. So if you see my van out there, it's a white 93 Ford Econoline 150. Yeah, I'd like it back. Without a home, your brain shuts down and goes into just survival mode. You can only think of the very next thing that you absolutely need. You gotta pee, that's what you think of until you get done peeing. If you're hungry, that's what you think of until you can only go from point to point to point. Planning ahead falls out the window, and you start making poor decisions, not because you're less smart, because your brain functions on this level that says, look, I've only got this little bit of whatever, and I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can, and you end up, it turns into an instant gratification thing. So I recognize the difference in stability. I feel it when I have stable housing. I see the change in the way my brain operates when I have stable housing. I was part of the hotel initiative, so those 3 months were nice and stable. At the end of the hotel initiative, less than a third were housed. Instead of creating some sort of situation that provided housing for these people and prevented homelessness, they put them right back out on the street. We still wanted to be visible, we still wanted to make a point, so we moved to Illis Davis Park. They swept us 3 times there. There's no dustpan for us, do you know what I'm saying? You're just pushing dust around the house. Until we have homes, we have nowhere to go.
The pallet shelter order is actually completed. It's been completed for a couple months. It's sitting in Washington. When Verge first started being in planning, we met with different HOAs for months and just said, hey, we're in the area, we're talking about building this project somewhere around Northeast, or it could be in the East Bottoms, West Bottoms, we're not sure. We just want to keep it somewhat centrally located. And everybody was super supportive right out the gate. They had a special committee that was created, and then when it went to City Council as a whole, that's when kind of the naysayers were kind of twisting their own council member's arm, saying, no, we don't want this because it's gonna be too close to our neighborhood. That wasn't ever the plan. We've actually been looking at commercial zone properties since the start. And then it was like more pushback, like, well, this is gonna cause too much crime near the neighborhoods. When in reality, police departments in cities that have done this are showing a huge drop in calls. Just like KCPD has thousands of suspicious party calls, a lot of those would start going away if there's nobody suspicious hanging around downtown who's really just a houseless guy trying to be warm.
People see tents and they see homeless people living in certain places out on the street, and they ask cities to remove them. But they also don't want to build facilities and structures and resources locally in those neighborhoods. They're everywhere, and they're in all neighborhoods, and we need to provide those types of services and housing and support in all neighborhoods.
We are here because we want to utilize our knowledge and our experience to change the way they do things at the top of the hill, you know what I'm saying? A housing first approach get them off the street. Creating that stability is the first step in being able to find out what's really wrong.
The system is set up for you to go from street to shelter, from shelter to transitional living, and from transitional living to permanent housing. But there are massive barriers between each one that prevent success from happening, that prevents street from becoming permanently housed. Let's just start with shelter. Shelters fill up really, really quickly. If the doors open around 5, you need to be in line around 3 o'clock. If you're not in line at 3, you will not get a bed. So what does that do for your job prospects? Do I quit my job so I can have somewhere to sleep tonight? Or do I keep my job and I sleep on the streets? And it's a barrier that's in conflict with what the general public believes that the homeless people should do. They should work. Now, let's go from shelter to transitional living. So think about all the things that you need to get into an apartment. You need an ID, you need credit history, you need references. I have never met a homeless individual that hasn't had every one of their identifying documents stolen while at a shelter. You have to attend classes, there's often a religious component, and you have to do UAs frequently. They're gonna look and see if you've done drugs or alcohol. And if you fail that UA, you don't go back to the shelter, you go back to the street, and you have to start that entire process over again. Now let's say you manage to get all the way through TOP, and you have enough money saved, and you're able to go into permanent housing. Let's describe the type of person that is effective through this system. It's someone who has gainful employment from the hours of 7 to 3. It's someone who has all their identifying documents. It's someone who doesn't drink or smoke. It's someone that has good references, has good credit, and is able to routinely keep a schedule. Because it doesn't sound like we're describing people who need help. It sounds like we're helping people who have it pretty good, and they send you back to the streets with this thought, that'll show them. That'll show them next time they won't do that. But on the streets, what are they getting? You sleep about 3 hours a night, it's unsafe, you're not eating, you're probably self-medicating, you're probably gonna lose your job. How are you gonna pay for that phone that you got? You need to stay in communication with the network that you're building. It's a failed system. It's completely failed, and it's backwards. And that's why moving permanent housing closer to street is the right move.
My name's Jamal Collier. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. Been homeless 3 years, and now I'm with the Lotus team, Lotus Care House. There go the little Lotus cat. She's pregnant. It makes me feel invincible. It makes me feel like it's the reason why I'm working 3 jobs. It's the reason I want to keep going, because it gives me an opportunity to be outside of myself, but then also to be able to have somewhere safe to come back and be myself. And that's everything, man. And I was a waiter for 5 years. I got laid off because of COVID. When you actually want to go look for work, it doesn't come easy. Yes, I have felonies. Yes, I'm big, black, got tattoos. So a lot of those are bad marks for me. And even though I paid my debt to society, some people are intimidated by that. I can't really see a way out of that other than to really build a community. This right here is the closest I've seen, and that's the first for me.
How are you? So what we're trying to do is really define kind of what the values we hold here at Lotus Care House. What do you think are the 6 most kind of values that resonate with you?
Humility, community, creativity, balance, stewardship, compassion, growth, and resilience.
I think there's been a lot of lessons learned this past year. The Navigation Center is just one part of a housing employment ecosystem that we're trying to build. Figuring out how do we all work together, because we all come from very different points of experiences, different points of expertise, but how do we really work through those challenges so that, more importantly, no one dies this winter and that we can keep people safe.
The gears of government turn slowly, to be honest, but they do turn. And we are making some progress, and we're really excited about over even the next few weeks, some initiatives that we're going to announce here to build more permanent housing, things that we've never had before, and to incorporate it into our standard practices of finding homes for people. You know, we're still in the final stages of doing the RFP evaluation process on it related to building permanent supportive housing at a large scale in several parts of the city. We're hopefully soon going to be hiring for the first time, first ever tenant advocates, first ever people dedicated to homelessness support and reducing homelessness, creating and preserving affordable housing, staff that we've never had dedicated to this stuff. We're collaborating with KC Tenants to make sure that we get the right structure in place to make sure that those new residents have the rights and responsibilities and authority that they need to live self-sustaining, sufficient lives in their homes, to make sure that we're doing it right.
The city is eager to do anything, do something about it, you know. However, you know, time is sensitive right now, and we have to act accordingly.
We not out here trying to die. The cavalry ain't coming. We all we got. Winter's coming. Every day is getting a step closer, and we don't know where the city stand or nothing, and we in a race for our lives, you know.
Welcome back for the discussion portion of our program. With us in studio today is Brian Platt, City Manager of Kansas City, Markea Watson, Director of the Greater Kansas City Coalition to End Homelessness, Jamal Collier, Program Advisor at Lotus Care House, who has experienced homelessness himself, and Miranda Agnew, Director of the Leavenworth Interfaith Community of Hope. What do you wish city leaders in particular understood about what it's like to experience homelessness?
What it feels like to have hopelessness. Because, man, at the end of the day, you feel like you have no options. You can't even so much as lay down at a bus stop just to get some rest if you have nowhere to go. So it becomes like restlessness, which can turn into you getting delusional, exhaustion. It makes a lot of people want to commit suicide. It makes a lot of people want to give up completely and just stop the game. But I think if we had a way of giving somebody hope and as well as shelter, and it's not being forced by religion or you have to meet these requirements or you can't, like, because some people can't. Some people mentally can't. Some people emotionally can't. Physically can't, you know, and some people just need help.
What are the issues and challenges that service providers are facing in trying to address the issues that Jamal just spoke of?
This might sound kind of silly and basic, but I think that the biggest challenge is that we don't have enough adequate, affordable, and decent housing for people, and in particular for people who are single without children. And within the constraints of the fair market rent, in particular, you know, that's around $700 or $800 a month, depending on the funding source. And so finding, you know, decent housing for folks in that price range is becoming increasingly challenging. Housing folks without the ability to get them connected immediately to behavioral health especially is really problematic for our providers.
And can you help our viewers to understand what it is exactly that the Greater Kansas City Coalition to End Homelessness does and the role that you play in the work that you just described?
We are the lead agency for the local HUD continuum of care. And so we're charged with organizing and convening the homeless work in Jackson County, Missouri, and Wyandotte County, Kansas. So that has a lot to do with the federal grant-making process for continuum of care funding, but then also conducting our annual census of homelessness, working on, you know, a regional strategy around ending homelessness, working with our service provider community, our medical community, faith leaders, you know, city officials, all of those types of folks. And increasingly, we are emphasizing also collaborating and, you know, meaningfully collaborating with people with lived experience, such as Jamal, who obviously are the experts in what it is that we should be doing.
Brian Platt, Mr. City Manager, you have a very unique role in all of this. And on the one hand, you're dealing with a community, and not just those who are homeless or unhoused, but also the broader Kansas City community that has questions and concerns about this issue. And then you also have the very intricate dance that you have to do with the 13 members of the City Council, including the mayor, that are effectively your bosses. How are you navigating those waters to bring about the kind of changes that both Jamal and Markea spoke of?
I'll say that I think that everyone that I've interacted with here
does want to make some sort of positive change and improvement to the way we're providing services to this community. I think that sometimes we disagree on what that change is and should be and how we go about doing that. We've set a goal of 10,000 new affordable housing units in the next 5 years. This is an ambitious and aggressive goal, but we have to be. We have to be bold and innovative and aggressive in our actions here and our steps here, because this is an issue that has not started this year, but it seems to only be getting worse at this point. The pandemic has certainly exacerbated it.
Well, let's drill down on that a little bit. You mentioned a goal of 10,000 housing units, which would be amazing. I think we'd all like to see that, but how do we pay for it? I mean, the city took a big hit to its budget last year, dealing with a lot of COVID-related issues and things. How do we get to those 10,000 housing units?
For example, we've got 2,000 city-owned vacant lots across the city. How do we turn that into housing? How do we get someone to build affordable housing on those lots? We've got 100 vacant homes, abandoned homes that the city owns. We've already issued an RFP where the city's selling those for $1, provided that the new owners turn those into affordable housing. We're looking at city-owned property that other projects that we've got. For example, we've got a parking deck at Barney Alice Plaza next to the convention center. It's going to cost us $80 million already to renovate and rehabilitate that structure. Why not add additional community benefit by way of affordable housing on a site like that? We've got, of course, an inclusionary zoning ordinance and an affordable housing trust fund that we've set aside to help incentivize and push for more affordable housing units in regular market rate multifamily developments. And we've got to think about more ideas like this. We're thinking about also tiny homes. And also we just issued an RFP a few months ago that will hopefully create additional ultra low income housing for the homeless and those who are at the lowest income levels. One of the options there that we're thinking about, for example, is taking a hotel and turning it into permanent supportive housing. You know, the units are a little smaller, but at least you're getting a roof over someone's head and at a fraction of the cost of building new housing.
But Jamal, I'm wondering, you have experienced houselessness before. You are working with others who do as well. Does this sound like some new, ambitious, aggressive, innovative goal, or does it sound like more of the same to you?
To be honest, it does sound like they're trying, but it is more of the same, because none of the things that I've heard have worked. Because yes, like the lady was saying earlier, there is a lot of mental issues that people are dealing with. There's drug issues. There's people deal with neglect, batter, things that, to where they feel like there's no hope. And the whole thing is giving a person hope. I had hope. I've been chasing my music career before I was homeless, while I was homeless, and after. It's a little bit more aggressive now because I have a little bit more force. I'm working 3 jobs. But without that hope, a person be like, what's the point of even trying? If the program came with something to incentivize or something that would touch on passion or touch on creativity or touch on things that people really live for, like you give a person that option in the midst of where they're at, to where it's something that they can smile or look forward to or see a better version of themselves, that is going to create momentum within their spirit. It's going to push them. It's going to make them be more.
I think you raised something very, very important here. And I want to bring Miranda Agnew into the conversation here. The interfaith community of hope. I mean, hope is at the core of what Jamal just described, because if you have hope, you have options. What is the role of the faith community in all of this? And do those things, I know there are a lot of places that have those sort of litmus tests. I mean, you've got to be these 5 things before you can even walk in the door and get a roof over your head. How are you approaching that work in Leavenworth, and what lessons from your work might we be able to learn from or apply here in Kansas City?
Ultimately, if I could sum it up, it's relationships. Because I think when we talk about housing, one, here in a smaller community, housing is tough because, like everybody's mentioned, when rent is $700-800 and you're somebody that has gotten disability and your disability check is $700, you're never going, like, we're crazy to think that you're ever going to keep succeeding when your income matches just paying the bills for your house. So we really here are focused on attainable, even an affordable housing. But even more than that, it's listening to our individuals, because we've got plenty of individuals that could move out tomorrow, and if they, we could help them with the funding, they would be fine. We've got other individuals who we have moved out. They lost their community. They were completely alienated. We're the only public transportation in Leavenworth. So when we put them in a home, in an apartment, they almost lose every service that's available to them, because to get back to us, they have to have housing, and the free, food pantries are all downtown Leavenworth. And maybe that's not in walking distance, especially for our individuals who are in wheelchairs. Maybe housing is the option, but in plenty of spaces, it's not a first.
For Jamal, you're absolutely right that, sometimes we have to have hope for people until, they have an opportunity to have it for themselves. And I think thinking more aspirationally about people's potential and their possibilities rather than what's wrong with them is a big part of, I think, what's broken about the system that's designed to help people. And in fact, that we often harm people by not seeing them in their fullest potential, or limiting them in such ways that, getting SSDI or SSI and getting a Section 8 voucher is, the end goal for people. And we all have so much more human potential than that.
So I'm curious, though, when we talk about issues around the local ordinances and things, what can be changed to minimize the harm that comes to people who experience homelessness so they're not criminalized for simply not having a roof over their head?
Yeah, this is an issue that really harasses my thoughts quite a bit, because most systems, or most legal systems, are punitive towards people who don't have housing, when really it's not the fault of the person that we've created these structural barriers that harm people and keep them isolated and alienated from the rest of us. And so I'm actually on the Kansas City Health Commission and on the ad hoc committee on housing. That's an offshoot of that commission, as well as the mayor's appointed task force. And so we're all talking about, these issues, and in particular around a houseless bill of rights, which is right now it's at the city's legal department being scrutinized, and I think that at some point in the very near future, it will go in front of council for consideration. But essentially, it's predicated on the UN's Charter on Human Rights, and the idea that housing is a human right, and that, people have the right to dignity and safety and all of those things. But then also we've identified through the pandemic that we have a significant issue around race that's driving our homelessness, and that we have to be mindful of those isms that are keeping people out of housing. So, homophobism, cisgenderism, all of that type of stuff, in addition to racism, is also embedded in the charter. And I'm really excited to see that we've been working also with our houseless community on vetting the language and, ensuring that it really speaks to their needs. But at the end of the day, really, we just don't want to be a society that punishes people for not having enough. And, that people need to, like Brian said, have a place to live and to sleep, and, before they can start working on those other challenges.
I'm wondering if you would be willing to just speak to the audience, just sort of broadly, not just the panel assembled here. What do you most wish that people understood about homelessness and what it is like to experience it?
I wish that people understood, just like they enjoy getting off of work, coming home, relaxing in their comfort of their bed in their own living space, another human person would like to feel those same things, whether they have mental issues, whether they've been raped, abused, cast out, or judged. I think if we had a lot more compassion in our community, it would help a lot of things. Showing compassion and literally becoming a fan of every homeless person, because they have nobody that cares. So if they had at least one fan, who knows, it could start a wildfire, and everybody could feel that way about this person, because one person saw potential in it.
Every month on our website, we answer your questions about life in Kansas City and issues you care about through our Curious KC initiative. Let's hear from our community reporter, Vicky Diaz Camacho, about our question of the month.
This month's Curious KC question was submitted by John M. He asked, isn't it cheaper to provide free housing for Kansas City's unhoused population rather than spending money on 911 calls and emergency medical services?
it's less expensive in all the ways, not just from a fiscal perspective, but also the human cost of, you know, having people living on our streets, I think is incalculable. And it's an issue that impacts everybody. You know, it's really a reflection on our value system as a community that we have this pervasive issue and an issue that's growing. And we know that it's cheaper, you know, to house people, but we also have a moral obligation to do so.
And that's where we wrap up today's conversation and this episode of Flatland. You've been listening to City Manager Brian Platt, Markea Watson from the Greater Kansas City Coalition to End Homelessness, Jamal Collier of Lotus Care House, and Miranda Agnew from Leavenworth Interfaith Community of Hope. Thank you for joining us. Please stay up to date on our series and submit your Curious KC question for our next episode's topic on flatlandshow.org. We're also excited to announce our participation in the KC Media Collective, a nonprofit media collaboration with KCUR, The Beacon, Starland News, Missouri Business Alert, and American Public Square. Visit flatlandkc.org/KCMC for more information about this exciting new initiative and to learn more about our partners. This has been Flatland. I'm DeRashawn Gilmore. Thank you for the pleasure of your time. Bye-bye.
Support for civic affairs programming on Kansas City PBS is made possible in part by AARP Kansas City.